Welcome to another interesting edition of the Economy and Politics Show, where we discuss key developments in the economy as they affect the households. Today, we'll be looking at the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's ongoing and the implications for Nigerian businesses. My guest is Dr. Andrew Nevin, the Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria. It's great to have you on the show once again, Dr. Nevin.
No, thank you. It's wonderful to be here. The pleasure is mine.
But before we begin this discussion, let us give you a wrap of some key activities from last week. The International Monetary Fund released a new international database on cross-border flows and positions of special purpose entities set up in countries of convenience and low-tax jurisdictions. The database for the first time is based on a common methodology, including an internationally agreed definition of SPs, endorsed by the IMF Committee on Balance of Payment Statistics. Also last week, the international crude oil price maintained over $110 per barrel regime for the first time since 2011 due to intense conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Also back home, the just concluded 2022 Nigeria International Energy Conference, Managing Director of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, Mr. Mele Kolokiari, said the growth of the gas business and low carbon intensive oil remains the focus of NNPC Limited. We go on a short break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation.
Tune in to Web TV Daily to stay up to date and informed on the financial market, personal finance, and more. We have got you covered with all your favorite TV shows, economy and politics, market review, women's series, millennial talk, Islamic Finance Weekly, The Brief, exclusive interviews, events, and we keep you up to date on all the updates in the financial market with the market opening gong. Watch premium content. Watch Web TV. Same news, different perspective.
Welcome back. If you're joining us, it's the Economy and Politics Show, and we are looking at the Russia-Ukraine conflict and implications on Nigerian businesses. My guest is Dr. Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria. Dr. Nevin, just go straight to it. How will you describe the impact of the sanctions from US, Europe, and Canada placed on Russia as it concerns the issues around global supply chain, and how is this impacting businesses?
Well, I think Russia has been surprised at the speed and the depth of the sanctions, and I think that we've all learned that despite some lessons we should have learned from COVID, we're still interconnected in a way. And I think that their sanctions, from at least the news I'm following, are hitting a lot harder than Russia would have expected. So, I mean, people are aware that about half of Russia's central bank assets have been frozen, about $300 billion US, if I have it correct, being frozen. They're also aware that almost all Russian banks have been taken out of the SWIFT system, making it very difficult to make payments. They're also aware that companies like MasterCard and Apple have essentially pulled out of Russia, so you can't use your debit card or credit card or Apple Pay anymore in the country. So that's all having a big impact. Of course, there's been a seizure of some oligarchs' property in Europe, starting in Europe, and there's been some movement in the United Kingdom on that. But the other thing about the Russian economy, I mean, in this interconnected world, they export grain and they export oil and gas, but they import a significant amount, almost all their manufactured goods. So that's going to start to bite very soon. And you may see it, it's not happened already. Apple, for example, shutting down Apple phones in Russia, if that's possible for them. So this is slowly affecting the Russian people. And of course, from an economic viewpoint, kind of strict GDP numbers, the latest projection I saw was about a 7% decline in GDP, which is catastrophic. So I think it just shows that when you're kind of connected to the world financially, and then you galvanize so many nations to by your horrific actions, you're going to pay a price, and that seems to be happening.
And how is this dovetailing into the global supply chain for businesses, particularly manufacturers?
Well, of course, Russia only exports, as I said, oil and natural gas and wheat. So what's not going to happen is what we've seen with COVID, where the supply chain is disrupted. We don't get chips, and we can't make cars, all sorts of products. We've seen inflation around the world, but particularly, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Europe have not seen inflation for a long time and are seeing inflation. But Russians' products don't feed into those supply chains. So I don't think it's going to cause any worse problems for the outside world, but it's going to cause problems for Russia, where businesses, for example, IKEA just shut all its stores in Russia and all its factories in Russia. So you're not going to be able to access IKEA furniture. Of course, the most of IKEA furniture, the parts and the materials for it are imported in the Russian context. So in a way, I mean, the hope of the world will be realized, or the world that's lined up against Russia, in the sense that, the Russians are going to be the ones that bear the brunt. Of course, we know there's collateral damage in the sense that it affects, of course, Western businesses, but in many cases, the size of the Russian market is not that material. I mean, the size of the entire Russian economy is smaller than Canada. The entire Russian economy is smaller than Texas, for example. So while the Western companies will take a hit, the Russians will take a disproportionate hit. Now, of course, it isn't the intention of these policies to necessarily punish the average Russian, but they will also be damaged heavily in this. And perhaps the strategy is that by damaging the average Russian's pocketbook and putting them in a difficult position, there'll be more political pressure internally to change President Putin's policies.
Okay. So at least the Western businesses that invest in Russia will begin to start counting their losses and exposure in terms of...
Well, we've seen those. I mean, Shell has pulled out, BP has, they've essentially walked away from their assets. Now, whether, of course, you can imagine that the Western governments turn around and say that they'll take the seized central bank assets and compensate Shell, compensate BP, and other companies that have abandoned assets. We'll see how that plays out. But I mean, I think so far the Western-based companies have been clear in saying that they need to do their part. I mean, it's now under the sanctions, it's both illegal but also morally reprehensible for people to do business with Russia if they're from the West, and that's starting to bite. So you're having, of course, Russians leaving boards of companies, Western-based companies that they're on. You have similarly Europeans and Americans and the Brits leaving the boards of Russian-based companies they're on, and you're seeing this kind of decoupling. But because the structure of the Russian economy and their inability to manufacture much of what they need, it's really going to hurt them hard. So let me give you another example. Russians import a significant amount of Boeing and Airbus aircraft. Well, to fly these planes safely, you need the original spare parts, right? And those are not coming into the country. So after a short period of time, we're going to find aviation becomes very difficult, and the civil aviation becomes difficult in Russia. And these examples will be multiplied in many sectors.
Yeah, really, really challenging times for Russia. And of course, like you rightly said, the Western companies investing there. In terms of the lingering conflict, like we said in the news wrap, over $110 per barrel crude oil price regime, that should be good news for Nigeria, but we're not seemingly benefiting from that. And how is this affecting the economy, especially revenue and stability in the nation?
We came close to eliminating the foil subsidy, and it didn't quite happen. It's still a politically difficult topic. It seems in an election year unlikely to happen. I mean, clearly there are people who benefit from this regime who don't want it stopped, and we subsidize more foil than we actually use. And of course, I think the latest number that came out is a $100 oil is a $3 trillion naira subsidy. I mean, there should be some flow through, but the more important thing I think is going on is, of course, our production has not been very high. I think it's dipped as low as 1.2 million barrels a day. And of course, we're subsidizing 400,000. So the net benefit is quite small, where we're only getting a net benefit of 800,000 barrels. But I think production has crept up a little bit, 1.4, 1.5. I mean, if we were at production 1.7, 1.8, or 2, like the objective for the country, in fact, we would be in a very, very good, I think, fiscal position if oil stays up for a few months. I mean, it's hard to imagine. I think oil is $119 today. It's hard to imagine us talking about such a challenging fiscal situation in the Nigerian context with oil at $119. But if it does stay up, and the predictions it may go higher, we will see eventually the flow through, and perhaps it will take some pressure off the naira. But what it shouldn't take pressure off is the need for diversification. I mean, again, if oil is at a high price and Nigeria benefits, let's use that time wisely to make sure that there's no let up in the CBA and in the federal government's drive for diversification, in agricultural commodities and services, also in manufactured goods, of course, with the AFCFTA. And I do think, and don't really make predictions about future prices, but when you look at the conditions around the world, I expect we'll certainly see over $100 oil for the next number of months. So let's take advantage of it.
Yeah, and there were talks about the fact, like, we said in our news recap, gas. This is a good time if Nigeria has been strategic about gas to Europe because, like you rightly said, Russia exports gas. So if Russia wakes up and says they don't want to do that again, Nigeria would have had a good opportunity to leverage on that in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, I think in fact the gas is the critical issue here. And if you think of the impact on Nigeria, I mean, the federal government over the last couple of years has rightly pivoted to say actually we should be a gas economy for a number of reasons. On that, we have a huge amount of natural gas. It doesn't destroy the communities in the same way. We can both use it internally to drive industrialization in the country. We can also export it. I think that from a geopolitical viewpoint, the fact that we've had the terrible events of the last month, and particularly the last 8 days, is for Nigeria the chance to really step up this gas investment. And they should be going to Europe. We should be going to Europe right now and saying, look, you need an alternative to Russian gas. We are the alternative to Russian gas. You need security of supply. You need it urgently. So we've had difficulties, of course, attracting foreign investors. But I think with the circumstances changed, we really should be out there saying we want the gas investment now. And something that might have taken 5 or 7 years has to be accelerated to 1, 2, 3 years, whatever the physical limits of it, because Europe needs it from a security viewpoint on that. And I hope that the federal government and the NNPC are out making that case in Europe right now. And that would really be a game changer for global energy situation. It would help in Europe's security enormously. It would help our situation enormously, and particularly as gas is a cleaner fuel, a transition fuel, as we eventually end up at carbon neutrality.
Yeah. And Dr. Nevin, another major concern is how Nigerian businesses should engage in this period. Like you rightly says, the geopolitical risk we're seeing between Russia and Ukraine. What should be their priority during this period? You mentioned the FCFTA. Would that be strengthened this period, or would it be a wait and see as the whole conflict unfolds?
Well, I think that the biggest priority, again, I'll repeat, is the gas strategy. So the government's already put together the gas strategy, and I think we should be talking to people to accelerate it. I mean, the worry about implementing the gas strategy was that people don't want to invest in Nigeria. And I think in 2021, we had the lowest level of foreign direct investment ever. And that's largely related to COVID, but we still have a challenging business environment. I think we should be sitting down with the Germans, sitting down with the French, and saying, look, we have the gas and we're ready to do this, and you need this from an energy security viewpoint overall, and that should be the number one priority in the short term. I mean, the gas strategy is already in place. It just needs to be accelerated given the circumstances the world finds itself in.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, Dr. Nevin, we look at our macroeconomic indicators. Will it affect in any way interest rates, monetary policy, and in terms of our revenue projections? Well,
I think that we're suffering. I think from inflation, like many countries in the world. I mean, it's dipped. The headline number has dipped. I think it peaked at 18 year over year. Now it's maybe 15, 16. It's still far too high. My own personal view is the number one issue that's driving increases in prices is, of course, insecurity, which is affecting the agricultural industry. So agriculture is still, I think, about a third of the economic output. And of course, for the bottom of the pyramid, which is about half of the population in Nigeria, eating consumes more than 50% of their income. And it's incredibly important that we get control over food inflation. And there's been a huge increase in the focus on agriculture. There's so many projects in the private sector and the public sector. It's really been a revolution in the last 5 or 7 years in the focus. And that's absolutely fantastic on that. And I've been very impressed by the number of private sector players who are both small, large, who are prepared to do things in agriculture, build up these supply chains. What's holding back progress in the agricultural sector is the insecurity. I mean, if a farmer can't go out to their land, his or her land, and farm it in security, they're just going to not plant that hectareage. I've heard from my friends in the agricultural industry, there's a situation where the amount of hectareage is reducing in conflict areas. People are farming close to their village. They're not going to the plots that are further away for security reasons. So if we really want to get inflation under control in this country, and of course food security, to make sure that Nigerians can eat at every income level, we need to get the security situation under control. And I'm of course not a security expert. I can't comment on how we do that. But what I can say is I do find there's much more political will about than 4 or 5 years ago, in the sense that I think everyone now understands, particularly governors, that the economies in the country can't really move forward without improved security. So I would put that as the single biggest issue. If we can make some headway on the security issue, then I think a lot of other issues, particularly around agriculture, will improve.
Fair enough. I mean, it's quite interesting to get the clear insights that you've given today, which is the need for us to diversify our revenue and move away from depending solely on crude to other sectors for revenue in terms of foreign exchange. The need for us, again, to take gas to the market, to tell them that we can export gas now that the whole Russia-Ukraine issues are unfolding. The need for security, because food inflation, like you rightly said, the analysis shows that Nigeria spent more. Last year, Nigeria spent more on food, other items. So we need to really address security so that we can improve agro activities and reduce food inflation. But all the same, we hope that the unfolding developments will be something for us to watch, particularly in economic indicators. Well, thank you for this time, Dr. Nevin, for the fresh insights you've given to us and letting us know that it's not going to be so impactful, the impact on Russia, because of the global supply chain concerns. Thank you once again for your insights on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and implications for Nigerian businesses. We had Dr. Andrew Nevin, Chief Economist, PricewaterhouseCoopers, on the Economic and Politics show today. Thank you once again, Doctor.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. And that'll be all for this edition of the Economy and Politics show. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the implications for Nigerian businesses, please send them to towasidabaseko@proshng.com. Also join our website, www.proshng.com, for our latest news, articles, reports, and stories on the Nigerian economy. You can engage us via our social media platforms displayed on the screen. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching and have a nice day.